It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday evening. Nothing unusual had happened that day. I came home from work, changed into comfortable clothes, and started preparing dinner while my husband watched television in the living room. We had been married for 9 years. 9 years of routines. 9 years of shared mornings, quiet dinners, and weekend errands that felt so ordinary they almost became invisible. That night felt exactly the same, at least in the beginning. Around 8:30 p.m., my husband stood up and stretched. "I'm going to take a shower," he said. "Okay," I replied without looking up from my phone. A few seconds later, I heard the bathroom door close and the water begin running. The house fell into that familiar evening silence. I sat on the couch scrolling through social media, barely paying attention to anything on the screen. Then suddenly a notification appeared. A message from my husband that immediately felt strange. He was 15 feet away in the shower. I frowned and opened the message. The moment I read the words, the world seemed to stop. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. Same place tomorrow." For several seconds, I stared at the screen. My brain struggled to process what I had just read. I scrolled upward. No previous messages. The conversation was empty, which meant something very specific. He had deleted everything before this message. Everything except the one he had just sent. And somehow, he had sent it to me by mistake. The sound of the shower water stopping echoed from the bathroom. My hands started shaking. I locked my phone and placed it quietly on the table. My heart was racing so loudly it felt like it filled the entire room. 9 years of marriage. 9 years of trust. And suddenly, everything felt uncertain. The bathroom door opened. My husband walked out with a towel around his neck. He smiled casually. "Dinner smells good." I looked at him carefully, trying to see if there was any sign of guilt on his face, any sign that he realized what he had just done. But he looked completely normal, completely relaxed, which meant he had no idea. He had no idea that the message meant for someone else had landed in my hands. I could have confronted him right then. I could have shown him the message and demanded an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I did something much quieter, much more patient. While he went to the kitchen to grab a drink, I walked into the bedroom. His phone was lying on the nightstand, unlocked. I picked it up. My hands were steady now, almost calm, because once you see the truth, you stop being afraid of it. The contact list was easy to scroll through, and it didn't take long to find something interesting. A contact saved under a man's name, Ollie, but the profile picture was hidden. No photo, which made it even more suspicious. I opened the conversation. Dozens of messages appeared. Messages he thought were deleted, but they weren't. They were just hidden. And the first one I read told me everything I needed to know. "I wish we didn't have to hide like this." I slowly locked the phone and placed it back exactly where it had been. Then I walked back into the kitchen. My husband was setting plates on the table. He looked up and smiled. "Everything okay?" I smiled back. "Perfect." And that was the moment I decided something important. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Instead, I was going to wait. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge doesn't happen in anger. It happens in silence. For the next 3 weeks, I said nothing. Not a single word about the message. Not a single question. I acted exactly the same as always. Breakfast together in the morning. Small conversations about work. Quiet evenings watching television. If my husband noticed anything different, he didn't show it, which meant he still had no idea. But while he thought life was normal, I was watching, carefully. The first thing I did was memorize the number saved under Ollie. The name itself told me everything. If someone saves a woman's number under a man's name, it usually means one thing. They don't want anyone asking questions. Late one evening, while my husband slept beside me, I quietly entered the number into my own phone. The name appeared almost immediately. Lily. I stared at the screen for several seconds. So now she had a name. Lily. Over the next few days, I learned more. Social media makes things surprisingly easy if you know where to look. Within a week, I knew where she worked, a consulting company downtown. I also discovered something else. She traveled often, mostly for conferences. The same conferences my husband had mentioned several times over the past year. Trips he always described as work meetings. Trips I never questioned, because trust makes you believe explanations that might not actually make sense. Now I started paying attention to details I had ignored before. The dates of his trips, the locations, the hotels he preferred when he traveled. One name appeared again and again. A small business hotel near the airport. 3 weeks after the message, he mentioned another trip. I might be working late tomorrow, he said casually during dinner. Big project deadline. I nodded. Okay. My voice remained calm. Inside, I was already planning the evening. The next night, he left the house around 7. He kissed me goodbye at the door. Don't wait up, he said. I might be late. I won't, I replied. Then I watched his car disappear down the street. I waited 15 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. The hotel was 20 minutes away. The parking lot was half full when I arrived. I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street where I could see the entrance clearly. 10 minutes later, his car pulled into the lot. He stepped out, and a few seconds later, she appeared. Lily. They hugged, just like people who had done it many times before. They walked into the hotel together. I didn't feel the anger I expected. Instead, everything felt strangely calm, because I had already decided what to do. I opened my phone, found her number, and typed a message. His wife knows. I watched the screen carefully. It took less than 5 seconds for the reply to arrive. What? I typed again. You should ask him why he hasn't told you about the other woman. The response came immediately. What other woman? I smiled, because that message told me something important. Lily thought she was the only one. I opened my phone gallery, selected the screenshots I had taken from my husband's messages, and sent them. Then I leaned back in my seat and waited, because sometimes the truth doesn't destroy one life. Sometimes it destroys two. And inside that hotel room, the night was about to get very interesting. For several minutes, nothing happened. I sat in the car across the street from the hotel, watching the entrance quietly. The night air was calm, and the soft glow of the streetlights reflected off the empty road. Then my phone vibrated. Another message from Lily. Is this a joke? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. No. A few seconds passed. Then another message appeared. He told me he was divorced. I smiled slightly, because that confirmed what I had suspected. He wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to both of us. I typed one final message. Room number? The typing dots appeared on the screen immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she replied, 402. Perfect. I stepped out of the car and walked calmly toward the hotel entrance. The lobby was quiet. A single employee sat behind the front desk, barely glancing up as I walked past. The elevator doors opened with a soft sound. A moment later, I was standing in the hallway of the 4th floor. Room 402 was halfway down the corridor. The door was slightly open. Inside, I could hear raised voices. Lily's voice sounded angry. You said you were divorced. My husband's voice followed quickly. Where did you hear that? Your wife. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then my husband spoke again. She's lying. I stepped closer to the door. Inside, I could hear Lily pacing across the room. Why would she lie about something like that? You don't understand, he said quickly. She's jealous. She. That's when I pushed the door open. The room went completely silent. My husband turned toward me slowly. The color drained from his face. Lily looked back and forth between us. You, he whispered. I leaned against the doorframe calmly. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Lily finally asked the obvious question. You're his wife. Yes. She slowly turned toward him again. You told me you were divorced. My husband looked trapped. Lily, I can explain. But she didn't want an explanation anymore. The realization had already reached her. The lies, the hidden messages, the secret meetings. She grabbed her bag from the chair beside the bed. You lied to both of us, she said quietly. Then she walked past me toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped for a second beside me. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. Then she disappeared down the hallway. My husband and I were left alone in the room. The silence felt heavy. He finally looked at me. How long did you know? 3 weeks. His eyes widened slightly. 3 weeks. Yes. I stepped further into the room. You sent me a message by mistake. I continued. The one meant for her. He closed his eyes briefly. And instead of confronting me, you watched, he finished. I nodded. Then I walked over to the small table near the window and picked up the hotel key card. Tonight wasn't revenge, I said calmly. It was clarity. He looked confused. What do you mean? I placed the key card back on the table. It means now everyone knows the truth. And with that, I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, he didn't try to stop me, because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't anger. Sometimes it's simply walking away, after the truth has done all the work for you.